I'm disgusted.
The mother of a teen shot by Baltimore police speaks with FOX45 News.
He had a gun because he was scared for his life. We live in Baltimore City.
How she's defending her son, who's now being charged as an adult. The department responsible for picking up your trash and recycling is asking for more city funding. The pushback from council members on an agency they say isn't meeting expectations. Former Maryland education employees calling the work environment toxic.
Our schools, our teachers, and our students are suffering.
The demands for the state superintendent to step down. A 15-year-old arrested for attempted murder on a school bus. The major roadblock keeping police from questioning him, and how police say that's making it harder to hold young people accountable across the state.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 10.
No matter what he had on him, he didn't aim it at nobody. He didn't shoot it at nobody.
A mother defends her son and now faces charges weeks after a Baltimore City police officer shot him. I'm Kai Jackson.
And I'm Mary Bubala. Fox 45's Keith Daniels spoke with that mother tonight. He'll join us live with her story coming up.
Plus, Fox 45 News is following your tax dollars on the national and local levels. You're taking a live look from Washington, D.C. on the left side of your screen, where the House just voted to pass the debt limit deal. That bill now goes on to the full Senate. We'll have a live report coming up at 10:20.
And on the right side of your screen, a live look at Baltimore City Hall, where council members are questioning Department of Public Works leaders during tonight's budget hearing.
Now, this is one of several budget hearings the council is holding this week. Mackenzie Frost has a closer look.
Wasn't more involved.
We've been discussing what our priorities are as a council since the beginning of this ARPA money.
Especially after a Fox 45 News investigation revealing Director Shamaya Kearney was shielding some details from the public and the council about the ARPA selection process.
There's just been spending it, creating a new unfunded future liabilities, creating a lot of positions for a lot of groups that come next year, year after that. They'll have no funding for them, as opposed to investing it in things that are important for the citizens of Baltimore, like our basic city services.
Looking at the city's database, millions of dollars have been given to nonprofits and quasi-government agencies, like the Downtown Partnership getting $1.6 million, $300,000 for the Ambassador Theater renovation, or $4.8 million for the Cash Campaign, going toward guaranteed income payments. Does that raise any red flags to you that certain nonprofits and quasi-government agencies are getting ARPA funding when city agencies as important as the fire department are not?
Yeah, that's very concerning. It was quite surprising to learn that last night.
Now, the fire department left waiting to find out if funding for their needs will be granted.
Our members were on the front lines doing their job, protecting the citizens. And to know that the city government kind of doesn't really appreciate that, it puts a bad taste in the member, and that could be the huge issue we're having with retention and recruitment in this department.
The council will bring back the Office of Recovery Friday evening for another round of questioning, trying to get more answers about how the Scott administration plans to spend all of this money. In the newsroom, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Mayor Brandon Scott and the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement will announce a new program tomorrow morning. The Baltimore Peacemobile will go into communities in need of resources after a traumatic event to offer support. It comes after the mayor and Monzi announced another new program today, known as the Safe Passage Initiative. It's being piloted at 2 schools right now. It will put city employees near those schools from 2 to 5 in the afternoon to keep the peace among students and offer resources. The program is announced in in a news release without many details. So we sent questions asking, what schools will the program be expanded to next year? What exactly are the roles for the partners in this program? And what is the price tag for the plan this year and next year? A spokesperson with MSDE responded saying the cost for the initiative is minimal, but did not give an exact number. The statement goes on to say partners will monitor priority areas, engage young people, and conduct violence intervention work. The spokesperson also says it will use the lessons learned in the first few weeks of the program to inform how it will expand in the next school year. MSDE's budget hearing is next week.
Fox 45 News is hearing from the mother defending her 17-year-old son, who police say ran from them carrying a gun. Her son facing several charges after a Baltimore police officer shot him earlier this month. Fox 45's Keith Daniels spoke with the boy's mother. And Keith, what is she saying about these charges and her son's role in all of this?
Well, Kai, first off, the mother admits her son had a gun. Now, police say it was a stolen 9mm handgun, but tonight, her questions about the shooting and the charges that followed.
I'm grateful that he's still alive.
Kiara Franklin is a mother focused on the criminal charges against her son, 17-year-old Makai Franklin. The teen shot by a Baltimore police officer. The mother not understanding why it happened.
He never turned around. He never lifted the gun up or raised it at the officer.
Franklin speaking out one day after prosecutors charged the teen with several charges, including first-degree assault and firearm offenses. The 17-year-old charged as an adult in a shooting caught on a police body-worn camera.
Stop! 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 Put the gun down! Put the gun down!
The shooting happened in the Shipley neighborhood in southwest Baltimore, May 11th. 5 days later, investigators released the video. The officer and Makai in a foot chase after police say the officer thought Makai might be armed. At one point, circled in red, the gun is seen clearly in the video. Then the officer opens fire. The teen shot in the back, but survived.
My son wasn't supposed to be gunned down the way he was.
What about the fact that your son had a gun?
He had a gun because he was scared for his life. We live in Baltimore City.
The debate over the shooting still ongoing amid gun violence involving youth, raising questions for some over parent accountability, including Franklin's for her son.
How am I accountable for what he has on him? That's not bad parenting. That's not the parent's fault. You know, how can you blame that on the parent? My son's 17 years old. You know, he's not a 5-year-old little kid, you feel me? So at the end of the day, there's only but so much I can do.
Well, Makai is out of the hospital. He's been moved to central booking at this hour, where he's waiting on a hearing that will decide whether or not his case be moved to juvenile court. We're live tonight. Keith Daniels, Fox 45 News.
Still ahead on Fox 45 News at 10 o'clock tonight, some former Maryland education employees say the department's work environment is toxic. Tonight, Project Baltimore investigates at a time some are calling for the superintendent to resign. As Congress works to avoid a first-ever U.S. debt default, Maryland's only Republican in Washington says why he's voting no on that bill.
Well into the 80s for Baltimore on Thursday, but could be threatening 90 by the end of the week. I'm going to let you know how close we get and how long it lasts in my Weather Authority forecast.
And coming up at 10:30 tonight, how the case of a teen in Prince George's County accused of trying to kill another teen on a school bus brings about harsh criticism for state juvenile services. We'll have reaction from the governor of Maryland coming up.
Tonight, turmoil at the Maryland State Department of Education. Former employees are speaking about a toxic work culture, which they say threatens public education in our state.
As Project Baltimore's Chris Papps explains, it's happening as the state school board is nearing a vote on who will lead MSDE into the future.
Within the next 2 months, the Maryland State Board of Education has an important decision to make. Will it extend or end the state superintendent's contract?
And if you have small insights, Chris.
Mohammed Chaudhry's current contract ends next year. He has yet to publicly say whether he wants to stay on the job. But with the board's decision nearing, many others are speaking out.
Governor Moore has promised the best in state government,
including former MSDE staffer Robert Eccles.
The ongoing unacceptable practices at MSD further embarrass the whole state and his administration.
Eccles took his concerns straight to the state board last week, testifying that 10 former MSDE employees recently wrote letters to the board calling for an independent investigation into what he called a toxic workplace culture.
To discuss concerns about the toxicity that is...
Eccles, who worked as a specialist for the department that certified teachers and other personnel, described what he says he witnessed while working under Chaudhry.
Agency leaders and staffers have been disempowered. MSD leadership is unwilling to accept counsel from experienced staff. The massive exodus of staffers across the agency is unprecedented and self-inflicted.
The leadership at the State Board of Education, including President Clarence Crawford, has said they support Chaudhry. Project Baltimore requested an interview with the state superintendent to discuss Eccles' testimony. He declined. But his office explained in a statement that Eccles hasn't worked at MSDE since 2021, and his information is incorrect and misleading. The statement explained how under Chaudhry, retention is up and attrition is down compared to prior administrations. When Chaudhry started in 2021, there were 188 vacancies at MSDE. That number expanded to 257 during the COVID hiring freeze, and now MSDE says it's on track to be less than 100 by the end of June. The department also says the turnover rate is significantly lower now than it was 2 years ago.
And you've heard stories about a toxic culture in MSDE. That's correct.
Brian Thompson runs the blog Informed Carroll County. A couple months ago, he posted this petition on change.org calling for Chaudhry to resign. It already has more than 2,500 signatures. Thompson says when he posted the petition, he was shocked at how quickly it gained traction.
When we put out the petition 2 months ago, that's when we started having several former and current employees of the Maryland State Department of Education come forward with stories of a toxic work culture, of the superintendent being disrespectful to employees, berating his employees.
Are you familiar with a petition going around for the state superintendent to resign?
Yes.
Did you sign that?
Yes, I did.
Project Baltimore also spoke with this whistleblower who worked in a leadership position at MSDE during Chaudhry's administration.
Why did you sign it?
Because I believe the Maryland State Department of Education is in a worse place now than it's ever been, and I don't see it getting any better.
Project Baltimore agreed not to identify this whistleblower who fears retaliation. We spoke with them in April about MSDE redacting state test results. But during that conversation, the toxic work environment came up.
It's time that someone stands up and says something about the leadership that is there right now. I think people have been quiet for too long.
The whistleblower told Project Baltimore they do not know Robert Eccles, but both are sharing similar stories. As a state school board is set to make an important decision on the future of public education in our state and who will lead it.
This is an imperative call because current staffers, our schools, our teachers, and our students are suffering. Last part, the integrity of this body is called into question if it does not move to action. Thank you.
Superintendent Chaudhry's contract is set to expire in June of next year, but the board members will have to notify him if they plan to renew his contract by their board meeting in July. I'm Chris Papst, and this is Project Baltimore.
Well, the House votes to pass the debt limit deal tonight. Right after the break, a live report from Washington on the work that remains to avoid default on America's loans.
It's becoming more and more difficult to hold juveniles accountable.
Frustration from law enforcement and elected leaders over state laws they say give juvenile offenders too much protection. How Governor Wes Moore is responding to the criticism within his own party.
And after highs at 80 today, it looks like things warm up even further for tomorrow into the low and mid 80s. And if you thought that was warm, could be the hottest that we've been since back in September. By Friday, highs at 91. But look at that into the weekend. Maybe some chances of rain increasing. I'm going to let you know how long that's going to last for you, if that's going to wet down all your weekend plans. And my Weather Authority forecast coming up.
Here's a live look right now at the U.S. Capitol, where the bill to avert a first ever default on U.S. debt has cleared the House and now in the hands of the Senate. There's less than a week left to get it to the president.
By a vote of 314 to 117, the House of Representatives agreed to raise the nation's debt ceiling just before that June 5th deadline.
Sinclair's chief political correspondent Scott Thuman shows us what it took and what fights are still ahead that could affect the entire country. Scott?
Yeah, Kai and Mary, nothing like pushing it to the limit. It's very, very typical in the city right now, right? Some would argue that this is Washington both at its best and its worst, waiting until the last minute to hopefully avoid a catastrophe, and yet doing so by finding compromise.
The bill is passed.
Congress with a collective exhale after overcoming perhaps the biggest hurdle toward avoiding financial default for the first time in history. But it didn't come easy, as Republicans forced the president's hands to future spending cuts in exchange for a new debt ceiling now, pushing back the default date until January 1 of 2025.
Tonight, we're going to give America hope. Tonight, we are going to vote for the largest savings in American history.
Many Republicans calling it a win, cutting the deficit $1.5 trillion over the next decade. But some conservative Republicans say it doesn't nearly go far enough, trashing their own party.
This deal begs the question, with Republicans like these, who needs Democrats?
Speaking of, Democrats too torn over the compromise. Some progressives complain the concessions could mean less funding to fight climate change and stricter work requirements for recipients of social services.
We're supposed to take care of the most vulnerable people, and with this deal, we're harming the most vulnerable people.
But any more delay could do real harm to America's bottom line.
I'm going to support the legislation that is on the floor today, not because it's perfect, but in divided government, we of course cannot allow the perfect to be the enemy of the good.
Next up, it'll head to the Senate, where the bill also has its share of critics, but both parties' leaders have vowed to support it. Possibly by the end of the week, they could then get that to the president's desk in time to have him sign it just before that June 5th deadline. On Capitol Hill tonight, I'm Scott Thuman. Now back to you.
Scott, thank you. Cutting it close, of course. Well, Maryland's only Republican Congressman Andy Harris voted against the deal. We spoke with him on Fox 45 News at 5 tonight about his decision.
This does not solve our fiscal problems. I wouldn't be surprised if we got downgraded with this deal because we're not dealing with our fiscal problems and our overspending that's leading to a huge debt and inflation.
Well, that brings us to our national question of the day. Do you think President Biden and Congress are making decisions in your best interest? So far, 100% of voters say no. Head to foxbaltimore.com/vote. Click on the Pulse tab to weigh in.
A 15-year-old arrested in Prince George's County and charged as an adult with trying to murder another teen on a school bus. The laws, police say, are preventing them from thoroughly investigating this case.
Black Lives Matter finances under fire once again. I'm Kayla Gaskins in Washington with how much the organization donated to charity and why critics are upset about it.
We're following three big stories at 10:30.
Black Lives Matter finances under fire again. Why critics say the group's charity donations are raising red flags.
The mayor is touting the first weekend of youth curfew enforcement as a success, as video shows a large group of young people fighting in Fells Point.
Prince George's County leaders are calling out policy in Annapolis. They say it's become too hard to hold juveniles accountable. We hear the frustration from law enforcement and an admission from the governor.
Well, that outcry prompted by the announcement that a 15-year-old accused of trying to kill another student on a school bus was arrested after a month-long manhunt.
Police say baby K was arrested yesterday and charged as an adult. Prince George's County Police Chief and County Executive addressed this case as an example of spiking juvenile crime.
The crime shocked this community. It shocked even the most veteran law enforcement officers.
We can't determine whether he was registered in school, where he lived. I mean, this kid was roaming about, apparently unsupervised and dangerous and armed. Where are their parents? It's a fair question. Where are their family members? Where are the aunties, the uncles, the godmamas? Where are the people who are responsible for these youth?
Well, along with the families, Prince George's County leaders are also pointing to policies in Annapolis making it harder to hold teenagers accountable.
Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor has more on the frustration we're hearing from law enforcement across the state.
Under the new laws of the state of Maryland, it has become more difficult for police to question young people about anything.
At a press conference announcing the arrest of baby K, a 15-year-old accused of attempted murder on a school bus, the Prince George's County Police Chief pointing to new state laws that he says make it harder to fight crime.
Are you able to question baby K?
The answer is that we could not.
Specifically, he says the recently enacted Child Interrogation Protection Act, which prevents police from questioning minors unless a parent and an attorney approve, is hindering his team's investigation.
Those protections have given way to a protection of some people who have committed very heinous crimes, which, yes, that does hamper what we are doing now.
A stance echoed by the county executive.
It is becoming more and more difficult to hold juveniles accountable.
And law enforcement officials across the state.
We're living in a time where, unfortunately, legislators, lawmakers, have decided that it's better to support the lawbreakers rather than those who are enforcing the law.
In Hartford County, the sheriff says new juvenile justice reform laws are keeping his deputies from holding kids accountable, contributing to significantly more crime in his county.
Since January 1st, 18 already who are now facing no charges.
In Anne Arundel County, more of the same. Police saying a 12-year-old who brought a loaded handgun to school can't be charged. Police also releasing a 7-page long list of crimes, including car thefts, animal abuse, and even rape that they say were committed by children under the age of 13, which current laws prevent prosecution.
Basically, a lot of things that unfortunately young people find themselves getting involved in, police can no longer take action.
But the lawmaker behind the law, Senator Jill Carter, disagrees.
The police department is incorrect that they have no tools. That is incorrect. They have tools. They are not utilizing the tools.
Earlier this year, Carter defending the measure. However, to clarify the other options for accountability that she says are still available, Carter also pledging to make amendments.
I'm looking at amending the law because I actually believe there are holes that we could fill in to mandate certain things.
And yet those amendments never made. As juvenile crime continues to climb throughout the state and law enforcement officials continue their calls for change.
We need balance. I'd like to see it rescinded and go back to the way we were before.
Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
Governor Wes Moore responded to those comments from the Prince George's County Chief and County Executive, saying it's become too difficult to hold juvenile offenders accountable. The governor says there needs to be more accountability.
Well, I think it's twofold. One, we have to make sure that we have laws that are actually consistent with crimes that are taking place. When you have young people who are taking on, in some cases, not just violent crimes, but multiple instances of violent crime, we need to have greater measurements of accountability. And it needs to be very clear that we will not tolerate it, we will not stand for it, and we have to make sure that when those situations are happening, that we are going to prioritize making our community safe. And at the same time, we've got to make sure that so many young people are not being put in these positions inside of the first place. We've got to both be able to address the immediate issue and also address the pipeline issue.
Well, despite those comments from the governor, he did not sign any legislation dealing with juvenile crime. Fox 45 News questioned him on a number of issues during the legislative session about whether more needs to be done to address juvenile crime. But so far, we've never received a direct answer from the governor. Early this month, we asked the governor if he thinks there needs to be a special session to address juvenile violence, and he didn't give us a direct answer. We'd like to hear from you. Do you think state lawmakers should have a special session to address youth crime? So far, 97% of voters say yes. Head to foxbaltimore.com/vote to weigh in.
When it comes to combating juvenile crime, Mayor Scott is defending bringing back enforcement of the city's curfew, claiming this past weekend was a success with no transports to connection centers. Fox 45's Maxine Stryker pressing for answers.
Memorial Day weekend marked the start of Baltimore's youth curfew, a new plan in place to keep juveniles out of trouble this summer that's drawn harsh criticism.
This is not a tool that's going to make the Baltimore city safer. This is not a tool that's going to go against the young folks who are intentionally creating unproductive activity at night. So I mean, I think we just have to accept that and literally move on.
But in a statement last night, the mayor calling the first weekend of curfew a complete success, saying in part there were no major incidents and no need to transport anyone to the Youth Connection centers. However, they say a small number of young people and parents either walked into Youth Connection centers or called to get more information. But our question about how many kids refuse to go to the centers went ignored.
It becomes a waste of resources if the city doesn't get the kids into the places.
And while over the Memorial Day weekend there were no reported juvenile homicides or shootings, there was chaos in Fells Point. This was the scene just after midnight Memorial Day.
It just escalated into a really bad fight. It was 30 to 50 people out here, all young people.
While it's unclear if any of those involved were under 18 and breaking curfew, police say the crowd was not asked to disperse. But the incident did occur in one of the 3 youth curfew engagement zones, which include Fells Point, the Inner Harbor, and Federal Hill. And according to the police memorandum, if officers spot crowds of 10 or more minors out past curfew, they can make an announcement to vacate, asking minors 3 times to comply and exit the area. We asked police and the mayor's office, why was this group not dispersed? How is it determined whether or not there's enough minors in a group to ask them to disperse? Police referring us back to the police memorandum and the mayor's office of neighborhood safety for curfew information with no clear answer. Maxine Stryker, Fox 45 News.
Roca, Baltimore holds an open house tonight to celebrate their permanent home on Pratt Street. Roca strives to be a place for young men to keep them away from violence. Well, city leaders say Roca has been a vital resource for helping young men restore trust in their future.
It cannot be law enforcement alone. It is a collaborative approach of enforcement with consequences, but it is also the relentless work to change life conditions, to change thinking and decision-making processes that puts people on a pathway away from violent crime.
Fox 45 News went on a ride-along with Roca last year where they showed us how they do their work and how they spend their money. Now, we've been asking the Safe Streets program, the city's flagship violence intervention program, for the same access for months and have not received specific information on how it spends taxpayer dollars or how it operates. The mayor's office of neighborhood safety and engagement oversees Safe Streets. We could get more answers to our questions about the program during the office's budget hearing next week. New tonight, a warning from Baltimore County Police about a teenage trend, the so-called assassination game. Teens using realistic-looking squirt guns in public places to shoot each other. When you're hit with the water, you're assassinated. Police say when they respond, they have to take the resemblance of a firearm seriously, and that could get people hurt.
The finances of the Black Lives Matter organization under scrutiny once again as tax documents show the nonprofit on the brink of bankruptcy as it ended last year in the red while doling out millions to those close to the organization's founders. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins has the story.
The movement swept the nation. What do we want? Justice! But a bright spotlight comes with intense scrutiny. No peace! Following the murder of George Floyd in 2020, supporters donated a staggering $90 million to Black Lives Matter. The nonprofit has spent most of that money, ending last year with a $9 million deficit. Federal filings from 2020 to 2022 show just a third, $30 million, went to other charitable organizations. $22 million went to expenses. This includes millions paid to board members and family members of co-founder Patrisse Cullors. For example, $1.6 million went to the father of Cullors' child for security services. Another $2.1 million went to BLM board member Shaloma Bowers for consulting.
I feel vindicated, because 2 years ago I said that this organization was a disingenuous scam, and it has proven itself to be a disingenuous scam.
Patrisse Cullors left BLM leadership in 2021 after documents revealed she spent millions on luxury homes in LA and Georgia. She took to Instagram last week, writing, quote, "For the last 2.5 years, I've been relentlessly attacked by the media. So many lies and so much mis- and disinformation. They are hell-bent on destroying my life."
This organization has been capitalizing off of unfortunate deaths and tragedies and guilt-tripping people to send them lots of money and donations.
They have really no idea what they're doing, and it shows. So that's why it looks like they're slowly going under.
On their website, BLM calls the criticism misinformation from the right, adding this is what happens when Black people are financially autonomous from white supremacist structures like the nonprofit industrial complex. We reached out to Black Lives Matter for a comment. We have not heard back from them at this time. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
I'm Christine Frizzau on Capitol Hill, where top Republicans are demanding transparency from the FBI. But will they get it? The very latest coming up.
Ahead on the late edition, city leaders questioning Baltimore's funding requirements from the Curfew plan, why some say they thought the requirement was a mistake.
And our morning commute's looking pretty good with some sunshine and some extra clouds. Temperature's going to be in the 60s, rising to about 70 by the end of the morning commute. I'm going to let you know when temperatures could be threatening 90 around here and when we could be getting some rain. We'll time it all out for you coming up in my Weather Authority forecast.